develop, make sure that principals and teachers know the flexibility of Cscope. And it's not scripted, and it's just a tool. And I think there's been a lot of progress from what I've seen happen, but also the state's involved in this too. They're researching and investigating Cscope and things from the state standpoint. But I just wanted to make that clear that we're constantly reviewing, finding ways to make Cscope flexible. And one of the key things is we want the teachers to feel comfortable and also feel like that Cscope is helping them as a tool, not as a hammer.
All right, board members, Mr. Brennan.
Thank you, Ms. Carr. Thank you, Ms. Wilson, for your presentation. It's very informative. Did a really good job of explaining what Cscope really is and what it's not. And going on past that, let's talk, if I may, about our district involvement in the curriculum part. Are we, as a district, supporting our teachers as they go through and use Cscope at the very beginning of the, well, I guess it was last year, we had kind of talked about that part of the support for the teachers would be there would be folks from your department that would be going visiting classrooms, and that basically we were going to, the curriculum department was going to be touching every teacher to ensure that there was no conflicts and that everybody understood if they needed help and that kind of thing. How has that process gone so far this year? And then also kind of a follow-up, have we, let's see, we've been doing Cscope for 3 years, 4 years?
I think it's longer than that, Mr. Sperlin. I think it's close to 5 years.
5 years? Okay. We've been doing it for 5 years. Have we surveyed teachers in this 5 year, as we begin to close out our 5th year? Is there any plans that we surveyed teachers to see where, because all of this is adaptive to the individual district, where we can adapt and improve and things like that? So it's 2 questions.
I think that was more than 2, but I'll do my best. Your first question had to do with the type of support that we provided to teachers. One thing that we do in the beginning of the school year when we have our teacher in service is we provide training for all of our new teachers on Cscope. And what you got was just a little snippet of what Cscope is all about. The actual training that we provide to teachers, we call it Cscope 101 because it's just the basics. That takes about 5 hours. So we do provide that training to the teachers. In addition to that, the C&I staff consists of our instructional people, our facilitators, who work very closely with instructional coaches who are based at the campuses. And we bring those instructional coaches in on a regular basis to talk to them about how things are going at the campus level, what challenges might they be facing, what ideas can we share on using Cscope documents. Are there any questions about any of them? Are there any ideas or problems that are being experienced out there? And that's really a great connection between my department and the campuses, because there just aren't enough people to be out there talking to every single teacher. So we really rely on facilitators and instructional coaches to help give us feedback from those teachers. The district did, as far as I know, there was definitely a survey that went out last year in regards to the implementation of Cscope to find out how that was going and what teachers thought of it, what suggestions they might have about it. And we do intend to survey the teachers again before this year is over, so we can get that additional feedback. Sometimes I've attended meetings with teachers, and they will have questions or comments about things like the year at a glance. They might question why certain units are placed where they are, so we'll have conversations about that. We'll talk about the rationale. Sometimes their concerns are just because we have so many standards that we're responsible for teaching, and there's really nothing we can do to reduce the number of standards. We just try to teach them in the most thoughtful way, to bundle them together and not teach them individually one at a time, because there aren't enough days in the year. So sometimes we just need to kind of refine our practices on how we look at those standards and how we teach them combining standards and lessons. So those are some of the conversations that we have. There are often questions about why is this unit taught this way? So sometimes it's a pedagogy question that we have some discussion about. And teachers have quite a bit of leeway in the how of teaching, how they might choose to teach a particular lesson. We just are pretty adamant on the what. It has to be our standards that are being taught. We really want teachers to stay, excuse me, within their lane, as we say. Teach those standards that that student needs to learn for that course, so that student doesn't move forward with any gaps in his learning. And we don't want to have redundancies either. We don't want to repeat the same types of lessons 2 or 3 years in a row, because then that takes time away from the other material that we need to be teaching. And using those documents really thoughtfully is helping us get smarter about how we're using that instructional time. Did I respond to everything you asked, Mr. Spradlin? Is that okay?
Thank you.
So people have questions. The board members, Mr. Washington.
I would just like to know, why did you decide to use Cscope?
Well, I'll kind of give you a little history of how Cscope came to be. And I talked a little bit about that, but not in a lot of detail. What the service centers realized is we had a lot of standards, like the example you saw in 4th grade, that were kind of vague. They really didn't tell us specifics. And so there were a lot of districts that were going to the service centers asking for help. We need direction, we need some support, and what does this mean? Can your math people come and help us out with this? So they realized that they really needed to have a specific support system, tools to help the teachers better understand those standards. And that's kind of how Cscope was born. And it was originally designed to help out a lot of the smaller districts that don't have large departments of people at the district level who have the time and the expertise to create these types of documents to help teachers understand better what those standards are. But then, as we realized, with the increased demands on our students and on our teachers, even larger districts were finding it difficult sometimes to stay current with what the changes are with TEA, to continue to create good resources that are quality checked, to keep up with all of that. And what Cscope has allowed us to do is to use resources that we know are aligned to our standards. In fact, they're built around the standards that you saw in those documents that we looked at. And to do that in a way that makes those standards really accessible to our teachers. So it's really designed to support teachers so they don't have to spend a lot of time figuring out what a standard means or what that standard looks like in the previous grade or the next grade. We're providing that information so they can focus their precious and valuable time on planning their lessons.
Ms. Swanson, can you explain what the service centers are? Because I don't think most people know what they are.
Yes, thank you, Ms. Carr, for reminding me of that. The state of Texas is divided up into regions, and each region has an educational service center that is funded through the state. And these service centers are tasked with assisting the Texas Education Agency and communicating with the districts within that region. So when the Texas Education Agency comes out with a new initiative, for example, new math standards, which is what we'll be seeing very soon, the educational service centers are tasked with providing staff development for those teachers who teach within that particular region on those new standards. So they're like an arm of the Texas Education Agency to provide us with information and support us with professional development. And that brings me back to your question, Mr. Scarlett. I forgot to say this, but Region 7, which is the region that we're in, that particular service center, as all of them, they are always offering various workshops using Cscope documents, like how do you use the instructional focus document, or how can you use a unit assessment in your classroom to make sure that your kids are learning what they need to learn. So there's a lot of ongoing training that can be taken advantage of through our service center.
I know you want to ask one clarifying question. So it's a branch of the TEA, the service center, funded by the TEA.
State.
Of the state, but it's operated, it's in connection managed with the TEA. So do they designate anybody in the service centers to be on the Cscope team, or how is it connected?
Each service center has a person there who is designated as the Cscope director. So that's like our point person with Cscope. So for example, if I have questions, like one of the questions I've been posing to our representative at our service center, I've been asking her questions about are there any changes that are coming up with the years at a glance, because we want to bring teachers together in the summer to talk about the years at a glance, to see what ideas they might have, if there's anything we need to adjust. So I'm trying to get information from her on how those particular documents may or may not be revised over the course of the summer. So every service center does have a point person who's specifically responsible for fielding those questions. And if there are questions that that person cannot answer, then they go to the state level team. And every service center is headed up by an executive director, and that those executive directors make up the governing board of the Cscope team. So it's very much a service center effort.
Thank you for the presentation. It's helpful. This is obviously a hot topic right now. First question is it working? And how can we measure its success as a board?
You know, that's a question that we're always asking ourselves, very much so. When we have a lot of different elements in play within a district or a school, sometimes it's difficult to isolate for having success in a certain area, which one of these initiatives is the one that helped us generate that success. So it's always a little difficult to pinpoint exactly how certain things have impacted an overall test score. But what I have seen in looking at and talking to teachers and looking at particular scores, I've done a few spot checks. For example, one of the teachers that you saw in the video has been very much a student of those Cscope documents, truly learning those and understanding those. So what I did was I thought, well, let me see how those test scores are at that school. She's a science teacher. And what I saw with that particular campus, that campus had greater gains on their 5th grade science test than the other campuses within the district, and also the state as a whole. So I truly believe that the more knowledgeable teachers become of their standards, and that's really what Cscope is all about, knowing our standards and teaching them adequately, then the better prepared our students will be for the assessments, the STAR assessments. What happens sometimes is sometimes teachers like to rely on resources they have in the classroom that they are comfortable with. And sometimes those are good resources. Sometimes they align to our standards, they meet the rigor, but sometimes they don't. And sometimes we have to say goodbye to some of these resources that we've kind of used over the years, but they don't quite work with our new standards, with our new STAR assessment. And that can be difficult sometimes for teachers to give up on that. But our newer teachers are generally the ones who embrace Cscope the most and benefit the most from it. And I would say in the spot checks that I've done, I do believe it makes a difference in our student achievement.
And to say, I'm going to chime in a bit over here. When you say does it work, it's hard to put it on Cscope because it's a tool. It's like saying, do the standards of Texas work? I mean, that's how the question would be likened into. Cscope simply packages the standards in a certain way that teachers can pull information in bite-sized chunks. So it's the management tool. Does it work? The answer would be yes. But, to say, does it work as far as student achievement concerned, it's the standards that we're teaching through Cscope. So it's not really an it versus a tool that we use. So if we didn't have Cscope, what we would end up doing is writing our own curriculum. We'd have to pull people in to do basically what Cscope does, is break it up into bite-sized chunks.
Yeah, I guess it's treated like an it because it kind of has taken a life of its own. And, a lot of people are trying to get information on it now, trying to understand it. What is it really? So I think it would be nice if the board, I don't know that we should do a whole lot that we can't measure whether it's successful or not. We've got to be able to measure what we're doing to know if it works. And so maybe we can come up with some ways now that STAR is being implemented to where, we can figure some formula out to measure it, because otherwise we're just here another year and it's somebody's opinion and against somebody else's.
Sure. And I think what you just stated is important. It's the framework that we need to really put together to measure from the board standpoint, because what you should be tracking is the improvement in the actual test scores. That's based, again, on the standards. Cscope, no Cscope, doesn't matter. What matters is, are the standards being taught at the depth and the complexity that is going to be necessary for our kids, our students, to perform well on the state assessments, also on our formative assessments, on benchmark assessments. So what we are working on right now is an internal accountability system that we will be presenting to you all at some point in time that will create some measures and some mapping points so that you guys can track the performance of the district in a systematic way.
And some part of it seems like it's teacher buy-in on it also. You could think it's the greatest program in the world, but your best teachers don't feel that way and they aren't going to use it. That creates an issue.
Well, keep in mind, it's not a program. So here's the thing. If a teacher, let's say that they were not a fan of Cscope, as long as they put together lessons that meet the depth, the complexity, the rigor of the actual standards, they understand the difference between the readiness, supporting, and process standards, and they can teach and put lessons together and do well on the formative assessments, on the benchmark assessments, and ultimately the state assessments, there's no harm, no foul there.
Has that changed since it was implemented the very first year?
Absolutely. This has been about 3 years running. This message has been about 3 years running. Now, from the district standpoint, what happens on the campus is where that autonomy from a principal standpoint comes in, because the principal could say, hey, here's what I want you doing. That's a possibility. If it doesn't